DJ, PK, and Tristan Freeman joins us, site expert for busting brackets in the field of 68 contributor. Tristan, good morning.
Morning, guys. How y'all doing?
Good. Before we get to the teams we're interested in, of course, put BYU and Utah State right up at the top of that list. We want to ask you about how you think they're going to progress in the bracket. But first off, did the committee get it right? Did they get it wrong? Because if they overseeded or underseeded somebody, or if they put somebody in the tournament who doesn't belong there, then all the people listening to us want to know, because when they start guesstimating on their brackets, hey, if this team shouldn't be in the tournament, why don't I just pick them to get out right away, get knocked out right away, and I'll get an easy win? So you got anybody like that for us? Wildly overseeded, underseeded, or shouldn't be in the tournament at all?
I mean, honestly, the prevailing talk after Selection Sunday, there were a lot of teams that were in places that were awkward. I mean, you could argue that the matchup between BYU and Duquesne should have been a 5 versus 12 instead of 6 versus 11, but obviously due to some restrictions with BYU and Sunday play, that they sort of get shafted every time they come into the tournament. And then Duquesne really didn't have the resume of an 11 seed. I thought they were going to be a 12 or a 13, but they get an 11. So that's interesting. And I think you mentioned Utah State. All the Mountain West teams felt like they got dropped down a few spots. Everyone knew that they were going to be a 5-bit league, and seeing what happened with New Mexico, but seeing Boise State in the playing game, Utah State not being as high despite being one of the top teams. Only San Diego State felt right. Everyone else went down. And then, obviously, based on what happened last night, a lot of people didn't think Virginia deserved to be in there. And you don't necessarily want to do hindsight, but seeing how they played, it's hard if you're a fan of Indiana State, Pittsburgh, or one of the Big East teams that were left out and felt like, well, hey, we could have done better than that, but that's just how it goes on Selection Sunday. There's always going to be teams that's going to feel that, but ultimately, if you're one of the 68 that got in, you just get to play your way through it.
Of the number one seeds, who do you think has the easiest path?
Yeah, but who definitely has the hardest path is Purdue, considering that they got to deal with all the former Mountain Invitational teams, Gonzaga, Kansas, Tennessee, and Creighton. I think the team that feels best is probably North Carolina, considering that you got two teams, Mississippi State and Michigan State, in the potential round 32 game. People thought they both should have been on the bubble. And then you have teams like Baylor and Alabama and Arizona, teams who are talented, good offenses, but have shown to be very weak defensively at times. And then, obviously, everyone's going to be looking at UConn. Their bracket's pretty tough because Auburn, San Diego State are teams with high metrics. They have the potential Cinderella, FAU in the round of 32. And then, look, whoever comes out of the bottom of the bracket in the Big 12 have BYU and Iowa State. Both of them have shown that they have the offense and or defense to really put in the scare on somebody. But to answer your question, I think UNC should probably feel the happiest about their draw.
The Utah State TCU winner should get the number one seed Purdue in the second round. But I'm looking at Purdue's tournament history since Edey went on the roster. And in 2021, he's a freshman, and they are a 4 seed, and they lose to 13th seed in North Texas in overtime. The next year, they're a 3 seed. They beat Yale in Texas. They get to Sweet 16, but they get a gift. They're playing number 15 St. Peter's, and they lose 67-64. And then last year, they're a 1, and they lose to 16th-seeded Fairleigh Dickinson. They've been knocked out by a 13, a 15, and a 16, and they have a 2-3 tournament record the last 3 years. Why should I pick 1-seeded Purdue to do anything? Should I just pick the winner of the Utah State-TCU game to go to the Sweet 16?
I mean, it's weird because you talked about the postseason success, but this is also the same Purdue program that in a non-conference against top 10 teams blow them out by 20. So they clearly have the talent and the potential to beat anyone in the country. Who knows? I think the theory that the way the Big Ten refs those teams and their styles doesn't necessarily work in March, but still, they should have been good enough to beat those mid-major teams. And either way, they're going to have a tough fight because TCU is a physical defensive team that's going to get in your face from the Big 12. And Utah State has one of the better front courts in this tournament with Great Osobor and then Isaac Johnson. They have the size to cause some problems. And the one positional weakness for Purdue is the 4 spot. So assuming that Osobor plays exclusively there, if he can have a 20-10 game, that would put the Aggies in position to potentially pull off an upset. But ultimately, it's just hard when you see a 32-game sample size of Purdue to not think that they're still not capable of making a run, especially considering now that Kansas won't have 20-point-per-game scorer Kevin McCullough in the tournament in a potential Sweet 16 matchup. It almost feels like the bracket can somewhat open up for them.
What should BYU be wary of as far as Duquesne goes?
So Duquesne's biggest strength, as they showed in the A-10 tournament, is three-point defense. They've been fantastic from that all season, and it's partially thanks to Jimmy Clark, who was the runner-up for A-10 Defensive Player of the Year. He has shut down every opposing lead guard in A-10 play, which is why Duquesne's defense ranks as high as it is top 25 in the past 2 months, according to Bart Torvik. And they like teams who like to shoot. Their weakness is actually teams with opposing front court scorers. But that's not necessarily BYU's strength because Khalifa's not much of a scorer, and Traore can, but that's not necessarily what BYU wants to do. They want to just shoot a lot of threes and be as proficient as possible. Duquesne wants to take that away. And if Duquesne can do that, and BYU has enough performance like they did against Texas Tech in the Big 12 tournament, then they're absolutely going to be on upset alert.
BYU doesn't depend on one big-time perimeter scorer. They got 3, 4, 5 guys who on any given day might hit 3 or 4 3-pointers. Does Duquesne match up with multiple three-point shooters at the same time? Because BYU isn't getting it to one guy who's going to be a top 10 pick in the draft. They're spreading it around to whoever's open and whoever's hot.
Right, and that's just what makes BYU so dangerous, especially in this matchup, is even if Jimmy Clark shuts down, say hypothetically, he gets put on Jackson Robinson and he takes him out the game. You still got Trevor Nell, you still got Richie Saunders, you still got Spencer Johnson. All those guys can get hot. And Duquesne isn't the biggest team on the perimeter. Their starting lineup is 6'3", 6'3", 6'4", and then their backup guard off the bench is only 5'9". They do have a couple of 6'8" European underclassmen guys, but they usually play the 3-4 spot. So BYU's going to be bigger, and they can just ultimately shoot over. And even if Robinson doesn't have a big game, the others can, and that's scary because Duquesne does very well with shutting down one guy, one star player, but if the role players have good games, there's not much Duke's going to be able to do about that.
How about the Mountain West? You touch on Utah State. You know, with 6 teams, they're looking to have success. Colorado State already has had it to a degree, but they need to really cash in because I believe the more success you have, the more benefit of the doubt you get in subsequent selections and years in the future, obviously. So from that perspective, with these 6 teams, you talked about Utah State already. What do you think about the other 5?
Yeah, and look, San Diego State's run to the title game sort of masked a past history of issues that the Mountain West have had in postseason play, where all of them just tend to lose early. Obviously, Colorado State gets them off to a good start, but the seeding of where some of these teams at is going to put them all in underdog positions in the second round. I mean, Boise would have to deal with Florida and then potentially Marquette, New Mexico, Nevada. Although I think they both have some interesting matchups. They'd have to deal with Baylor and Arizona down the road. So I think there's hope that and then obviously Utah State, if they get past TCU, would have to deal with Purdue. I think there's legit potential for all of them to at least win one game, but then they're all just going to have to pull an upset. Even San Diego State, they have a brutal draw because they have 4-seed Auburn potentially around 32, and Auburn's a team that has like top 10 metrics. the reason why they fell so far is because they lack signature wins to move up. But that's a hard fight before potentially taking on UConn. So even if the Mountain West played good this tournament, because of where they were seeded, there's probably going to be a low ceiling for what they can do collectively, unless one of them just makes a borderline Cinderella run.
The Big 12 has the rep and the computer numbers to back it up that they are the best league in the country, but they only had 2 Sweet 16 teams last year. Those 2 teams did get to the Elite Eight, but neither of them got to the Final Four. Is the Big 12 going to have better production in the tournament this year? And if so, which teams are going Sweet 16, Elite Eight, Final Four?
Yeah, so obviously the newcomer, Houston, is primed to be in a great spot as the 1 seed. We'll get either Nebraska or Texas A&M. Both are good matchups for them. BYU has an interesting matchup with Illinois because Illinois defensively has been very weak at times, and they're very vulnerable to a 3-point shot. And that's actually a good matchup for BYU, and I think they can make a potential run. Iowa State's in the bottom half of their bracket. They got either Drake or Washington State. They're a team that can make a run. Kansas is probably the team that we saw in the regular season sort of had their struggles. And now with McCullough out, they're incredibly vulnerable. They take on one of the top scoring offenses in the country in Stanford, who just wants to press and have as many possessions as possible. They're going to be on upset alert. And then one interesting matchup at the seedings workout, Texas versus Tennessee in the round of 32. That's the Rick Barnes game. And Tennessee with Barnes has had their struggles in March. Dalton Connect's one of the best players in the country, but Texas has played quietly very well as of late, and I think they're a team that could potentially go on a run because, like Purdue, Tennessee, they've had some weird losses as well in this time.
We appreciate your time this morning. Thanks for joining us. Enjoy all the games, Tristan, and people can follow you on your site expert, Busting Brackets, and the Field of 68 contributor. Thanks for your time. Thanks for coming on the air.
Thanks for having me, guys.
DJ and PK, when we come back, everything you missed in this show, lots of NCAA tournament and the Jazz rebuild. How long is it going to take? How far can they get down the same road the Thunder have gone down? How quickly? And when can they catch them? We'll get to that next. Stay with us.